Welcome again to the High Uinta Wilderness Project. We're seeing in the background Strawberry Reservoir as I was heading east towards the Uinta Basin. We'll call this trip number 4 from 2011 to the Swasey Hole Garfield Basin area, which I might mention is one of the most incredible areas in the Uintas. But I'll tell you up front that this turned into another survival experience for this apparently worn out old mountain man. I stopped in Duchesne to see Lori and Sheila and get up-to-date information at the ranger station. And they did tell me that the Hades Canyon road and trail has been closed. So make sure and call there before you attempt to go up Hades Canyon. I then headed north towards the Uintas, crossing the Duchesne River, which you see is on the 20th of July was still very high and muddy. Going across the sagebrush country, I got pictures of this really nice flower. It's the yellow bee plant, which is related to the Rocky Mountain bee plant that we see in the lower reaches of the Uinta Mountains. And then I got to Mountain View, where the road turns. One turns towards Rock Creek, and the other one goes straight towards Moon Lake, and then of course turns off to Yellowstone Canyon. But the store there is there, and so remember it. If you forgot anything, you can get it there, including fishing equipment. Then I eventually got to the turnoff road to Yellowstone Canyon, crossed Lake Fork, which is still pretty high, but it is a little bit lower now than it was in my last report. Then I got to the turnoff to Hills Canyon, which leads to the Center Park Trailhead, where I met Jeff Mitchell, Wilderness Ranger, who's been doing this for 5 or 6 years, and he was heading up to Spider Lake area to clear down timber from the trails. Registered, and there were a few others who were up the trail that I thought I would probably run into some of them, and so I was ready. Except I did have a problem. I prepared for 8 days, but then I thought, well, I better throw in an extra day's food, and then the creeks will still be high, so I better take my wading slippers. And the gals in Duchesne gave me pictures of all the snow up in the Garfield Basin still, and so I better throw in my long underwear and an extra long shirt, and oh my! Before I knew it, I had 54 pounds around my waist and on my back, which included water, of course. And it included 13 pounds of photographic equipment, which I actually thought maybe I should leave and just go with my little Pentax point and shoot camera. That might have saved the day if I had have paid attention to that thought. But here's the topographical map of where I was headed. You can see the elevation profile down below. I'll mention that a little bit later on. I got a late start that day and only did 2.5 miles. I got past the wilderness area boundary and set up my camp where I could see, or I could look down into the Yellowstone Canyon. And so I had a nice little camp there, and I felt pretty good. Got pictures of this little critter, and then the next day I looked up where I was going to have to go. I just assumed the trail would be going up through that area somewhere. As it works out, it switched back to the left and went over even a higher point on the mountain. But there I was up the trail, and as everybody knows who's been in the Uintas, the trails are very rocky. Some people would laugh at them being called trails, I suppose. But eventually I got up to above timberline, and with a giant snowdrift there that covered the trail, and I swung around and got back to the trail right up on top where there was a rock cairn, about 11,100 feet up there. And so I was above timberline. Flowers are really nice. The bluebell flower up here was very stunted compared to the way it grows down along the rivers, but from that point I had stretching out in front of me the most incredible view of the high Uintas, with about 6 13,000 plus foot peaks in this picture, from Mount Wilson to Mount Powell, and then there's some no-name ones in there, and of course the two Kings Peaks, but a great picture. And here's where I was heading, and you can see the arrow pointing at a very low gorge, or we'll call it a hole, because that was where Swasey's hole is. And I was going to have to go way down, and as I went way down, I thought, it's going to be kind of tough to get back up out of here. Well, on the way down, I met Joe Pratt and his son, Carter, I believe his name is. They said the fishing was great in the Swasey Hole Lakes. And then I finally got down below, going through the meadows, and luckily there were bridges across the creeks. But then I tried to be really cute, leaving the trail and going cross country or bushwhacking up through all this down timber to get in a position where I could more easily visit all four of the Swasey Hole Lakes without having to ford creeks. But eventually I hit a dead end, and I had to come back down, and this really wore me out, going through all this down timber. And so when I finally set up a camp, I was really feeling sick, just fatigued, nauseous. I didn't want to eat. There was a digestive component, I had a headache, and well, I got all my supplements and took what I could, but I couldn't eat anything actually. But I took my supplements, my vitamins and stuff, and kind of went through a tough night, which was even tougher because my air mattress went flat. And I'm going to have a little YouTube video on how to repair an air mattress, especially one of this type that I have, which is really a great mattress. But well, feeling the way I did, though, I thought, I'm going to have to prioritize. I maybe don't have, maybe I'm not in condition to be able to do everything that I wanted to do, and my priority was, of course, the Garfield Basin. So I decided I would bypass Swasey Hole and just head for the Garfield Basin, which I did the next day, getting a little bit of a late start because of having to repair the second air mattress. But I got up near the point of the mountain there where the trail goes around and goes back up into the Garfield Basin, when I really felt sick. It wasn't just the digestive component, the feeling nauseous, not wanting to eat, feeling weak, having a headache, but I also had all of a sudden developed a deep down, really ugly sounding cough. I don't even know where that came from. It just was all of a sudden, and so there was just a combination of things that had me deciding that I can't go on like this. Besides, I was having to go so slow and rest so often that it would take me more than the days allotted to be able to do everything that I wanted to do anyway. And so I thought I better concentrate on survival. And so I got out my spot tracker and I sent a signal. And back in Springville, Utah, my friend Luke Hopkins, he started noticing that because of my spot tracking signals, that there was something wrong. But I headed back. I got back and set up a camp about where I had camped the night before, and I started immediately taking medications. I started my emergency antibiotic treatment. Of course, I was taking gobs of Redmond clay for the digestive problems, and of course I was taking all my supplements and whatnot to try and get some appetite so that I could eat and have some strength. Well, that next morning, Saturday, I started listening to KSL Outdoors Radio and had my sat phone ready to call in to talk to Tim and to Russ, but all morning they were giving, there was recorded reports of their great trip to Alaska, so I never was able to call in. And then I just had to get ready to try and get out of there, and I thought it might take me a couple of days, but I thought I better get started on it. The only food that I really felt like eating was Dee's cereal and eggnog. made with dehydrated eggs and milk and whatnot. And so those two things became my food, and I actually had to jetson almost everything else, the other food, because I wasn't going to be able to eat it anyway, and I had to get rid of some weight, and so I've fed all the little critters up in that area, and of course I had my marathoner supplements and my Lance Armstrong supplements and all this stuff that I took, which all was very, very important in giving me the strength to do what I had to do. And so I started up out of that hole, and as I was plodding along, just 10-15 minutes, and then I'd have to rest for 10, 15, or 20 minutes, but I was praying out loud, talking to the Lord, talking about my life, about sort of life review, and about the commitments that I have made and the things that I still have to accomplish, and so it became a deeply spiritual experience for me to get to be moving up out of there. Of course, the trail was rocky and rough, and as I looked back to take this picture, I always heard some voices, and then here some three fellows came, and they were part of an explorer group that had already passed me, but I was feeling so rotten, I just wasn't very friendly, and so I never even got a picture of the whole group, and they'll have to forgive me. I should have done that. But along the trail, I noticed a pack that was abandoned, and I had seen it coming in. And I thought, it was some guy like me that was trying to get up out of that second hole, and he just said, I'm not going to be able to do it if I have to haul this pack, and so he just abandoned his pack. I hope he made it out of there. Of course, I've let the Forest Service know about the pack, and I've sent a picture of it so they can check it out and see what's going on. But then I noticed, looking down at one point, the bones of a critter that didn't make it out of there, and I thought, well, I've got to pray more, I guess, and to make sure that that's not the way I end up. But so I kept moving up the trail. Eventually moved out of the pines and started getting up above timberline with all the nice flowers again, and right at the highest point I stopped to rest, and my rest stops I was reading an incredible book, The Conquest of New Spain by Bernal Diaz, story of the conquest of the Aztec Empire. Oh, what those guys went through was just so incredible that it's just hard to believe. At that point, I was reading the chapter entitled Cortez Collects Fresh Strength. Well, through prayer and through my supplements, I had got some fresh strength too, and I'd made it to the top of that mountain. And so I was pretty pumped up, and it was great to see this last panorama of a view of the area and say goodbye to Kings Peak, and then down the trail into the snowdrift where the trail disappeared, and then out the other side, and enjoying flowers as I moved down to the place where I had spent my first night. And there I stopped to get some nourishment in me, some eggnog, some D cereal, some FRS, and I had mixed up an Endurex drink, so I finally made it. I made it to the trailhead by 7:30 that night, and I was so grateful to the Lord to have made it, to have survived, and to be there at the car. And these are just a few of the supplements that, of course, have been extremely important to me. I'll just flash them on the screen real quick, but you're going to have to go to my website, to the article section, where there's an article entitled "Where Do I Get My Energy?" and there I talk about all these supplements, and there are links where you can get them real cheap, and so that's very, very important. And so I moved down the road, had to take a motel down the Uintas Basin. I just didn't have the strength to be able to drive home, and so I rested that night, and I made it home the next day, of course enjoying myself along the way. I had to stop and rest often, and I, of course, reflecting on my whole experience and thinking about my future. There's only one area in the Uintas, one drainage that I have not been to, and so that's one that I will probably still try and get to. All the rest I've been to, and so I've really done it already. And so I'm going to concentrate on doing a lot of research about all the fascinating aspects of the Uintas and put this together into a package that I hope will be of great interest and great help to a lot of people.